Hey guys, Mustached here to review The Wild Robot, based off of a book, and I've seen the trailer for this quite a few times before watching the movie. Now, I've not read the book myself, but I decided to watch the movie. This is a DreamWorks movie, though I will admit I thought for a moment that this was Pixar before remembering the opening of the movie. I'm not sure why, but this is DreamWorks, and it is a definitely refreshing take. I think DreamWorks was dipping a little bit, right? Sure, there was Puss in Boots / Wish, which was a dip upward, and then outside of that, and before that, it felt like DreamWorks wasn't really doing anything spectacular. So it does seem like since The Last Wish, DreamWorks has definitely been pushing for these stronger narratives again, finally. So that is definitely refreshing to see. And I will say that really early on, that the Wild Robot definitely fulfills that space in the DreamWorks catalog, in the upper echelons of it anyway. So, with that being said, let's dive right in, and I'll be as objective as I possibly can be, and so on and so forth. So, the movie begins with a big old storm, and we're in the middle of a forest. And we begin to see these little otters skitter along this dam. And they come across an inactivated robot named Ross, and I forgot the serial number in my notes, so I simply wrote Ross in my notes because that is the name they typically use. At any rate, Ross is now activated. Seeing a massive wave come in, Ross observes how this crab is able to climb up the surface while they are struggling. So they use its mechanics to mimic an animal fairly early on here to make its way up the shore. But once it's up there, the crab is taken by a seagull via taking in the nature of the circle of life and all that. It is what it be. And boy, is that not the only time that that's going to occur, or be joked about to occur in this movie, that's for sure. So, Ross begins to roam around this forest, seeking a task to do for an individual, and is attempting to ask the various animals for assistance. Obviously, the animals don't understand, and are freaked out, and are running about. So, since Ross can't understand them, it goes into learning mode, and thus sort of sits there and observes the animals until it can process each and every one of their languages, and then process them into, our equivalent of English, for ease of us knowing what the animals are saying as well. And I found that quite clever. So, Ross does begin to speak their language, attempting to ask for a task to do, as that is its simple objective, is to, find one. But that seems to fail, as all the other creatures, despite being able to understand the robot now, still are fleeing. Some try to attack Ross, even going as far as when they try to access their transmitter, they get zapped, and now are dealing with a horde of raccoons that are sort of messing with Ross, in which the transmitter, alongside getting assaulted by said raccoons, among other things, but is trying to give chase to the abilities. making then contact with a bear, and that doesn't bode well either for Ross, having to flee that scene pretty quickly. In fact, in dealing with the bear, Ross tumbles down into a nest, striking a unsettling, unnoticed blow. The bird, or goose, rather, mother, or father, I think it was mother, probably, is shown dead, and all we see is one remaining egg. However, then we see a fox take the egg in an attempt to eat it. But Ross, noticing the egg, tries to keep it protected to the best of its abilities. Trapping the fox ends up sort of trying to squirrel around, as it were, hitting I believe that was a porcupine. I think the porcupines are the one with quills. I could be wrong. Sorry, I'm not an animal expert, so... anyway. So, we do then see Ross now remove the quills from the fox, which then quickly runs off before anything else happens. But the baby goose is born. And if you know anything about, well, birds, is that typically the first thing that they see, they typically latch on to as a mom. So that is essentially what happens here, is that the baby goose is born, sees the giant robot, and is like, ah, mom, right. So, in trying to help the little baby out, does think it is successful, and then assumes that its mission is currently complete, after sort of helping it in a sort of vague way, I guess, is a good way of putting this. However, the bird persists in following Ross. They come across a group of possums, or a possum mom and her various children, who then pretend to be dead in seeing this robot, just sort of walk up to them. But they unfortunately begin to explain why they are all dying or dead. And we have another death joke in which one of them is, like, almost scooped up. And then she's like, oh, one less child, whatever. Thus, though, once the possum is reclaimed to the mom, this mom tells that the robot that she gives, the possum mom gives Ross a caretaker role for the little bird. Or goose, rather. And thus we see the fox just sort of watch on as he kind of sneaks on back. So, she is told 3 things that she needs to do, or they need to do, to get the bird to fly. Swim and eat are the 3 categories that they are informed Ross is that this bird needs to do in order to survive. So, Fink is the one who primarily, from this moment on, sort of acts as a sort of tricky mentor, as it were. Initially, he is trying to feed off of the little bird, but in the process is fed other things like scallops and honey. In the process, once fed, is now the next step, which is trying to teach the bird how to swim. Fink does the, just dive in and Ross is trying to take a more ease approach. During this, since Fink can talk, or, can be perceived to be talking, says how this baby, Goose, is rather a defective baby, as it were, or not quite right. Something about it is off. But Ross figures that the best thing to do, currently, is to build at least a shelter. So it takes the blueprint from one of the other animals, I believe it was a beaver, and proceeds to build a pretty substantial sized, wooden house. So obviously the bird sort of just joins in wanting to help build the home. So now we're seeing the bird sort of shifting and kind of almost mimicking the robot this time around in that way. So Ross, now indicating that this bird needs a name. Initially, they are trying to use numbers, but Fink informs Ross that it would probably be better to just give it a name that is something akin to being creative. So Ross studies the body and names the bird Bright Bill, or as I'll call for short, BB. So BB is a bit freaked out while they're still in the shelter, so Fink begins to tell BB a story. And among this story, he refers to how the robot has a heart, as it were, though that is, in dealing with AI, that is among things that would be missing from a robot, typically speaking, obviously. But in this reference, Ross asks about love. What is it? What does it mean? And Fink, in the first time in the movie, initially breaks, almost breaks, saying that how he, grew up not with that love. He didn't have a family, apparently. That you spend a lot of time thinking about that core thing that you don't have. And so, it is clear here that Fink, even though he's slightly mischievous, definitely you can see the deeper already sort of want of family, or he keeps referring to, later on at least, Ross as a friend. At the very bare minimum. Later on, anyway. But it's very clearly more than that. So, then, we finally get a time skip here. That being BB is now fully, or I wouldn't say fully grown, but like a child, I guess a 10 through 12, puberty-esque. I'm not sure how bird biology works in that regard, but old enough to be they're able to talk, BB is able to converse, and all that good stuff. But he's still struggling with how to fly among swimming still. And we can even see how BB, with that much time passing, has even incorporated more of the way Ross talks and moves, even. Here, he meets a female goose. Now, I initially thought that moment was very akin to Bambi. I thought it was actually going to take the route of Bambi, where the two were going to be falling in love, like that typical story. But no, that doesn't actually happen, surprisingly. But he does get attacked, or he gets more so name-called by these bully geese, these slightly older geese males. And he's trying his best to swim there. But Ross moves in, seeing how hard of a time he's having. But things only get worse as a gator begins to attack. And this is the first time in the movie, at least to our knowledge, that BB refers to Ross as Mom. However, it's quickly hit with how the other geese tell him that this robot killed your mom, and thus this was never disclosed. Thus, Ross has to admit what happened being an accident, being how she sort of tumbled into that situation, as it were. And then BB rescinds that. He says, "You are not my mom. Because you cannot feel," once more, indicating that, hitting back on this sort of idea of AI. So Ross wanders off and eventually finds some of these unaccessed robots, or robots that are out of service. They bring one of them back online, and it is clear that once doing so, that it is actually already admitting to having to take less lessons from the brain and more feelings from the heart, as it were. So perhaps something more spiritual, I don't know, but at any rate. And Ross even admits that they have overwritten their program to a significant degree, and thus, like BB, is now called defective. So now that there is a direct parallel between BB and what we have been seeing from what Fink has referred to as this defective baby, now it's being transferred over to Ross being this defective robot. So it's not just about a family, but a misfit family. Ross is given a new transmitter chip from the other robot. And thus we see how Fink is suggesting to help BB. So there is already a deeper connection between these two, whereas initially, obviously, Fink was trying to eat BB, now is suggesting already to help him. So they try to teach him, or at least more so, Ross tries to teach BB how to fly. And this is the first time we have a little song interlude with a bit of a montage of them training how to fly with wing movement and so on and so forth. And I forget where this happens, but BB's leg at some point was destroyed, or one of their legs was destroyed somehow. So the beaver gives them a new leg. Ross proceeds to catch BB in the air as he's struggling to fly. So Ross gains the ally ship of I think it's a falcon or an eagle. Again, not a bird expert, so I'm not sure which it is, but either way, that bigger animal proceeds to help BB move his wingspan in the correct motions. And they begin to practice going through these little hoops that Ross has set up along the path. Thus, we're then introduced to the leader of the geese. I believe his name is Long something. We'll call him Long Leader, I guess. He's the leader of the geese, and he makes the claim that he's been watching them for quite some time now. And then proceeds to tell Ross that his own kind are the gossipy and boring animals among the lot of type of animals. So obviously they're playing off of what, humans sort of absorb from animals and trying to, how we sort of interlude our thoughts on how animals track in terms of nature in this movie. In the context of Fink being a fox, he's more of the mischievous, because us humans tend to think that that's the attribute that is most attributed to foxes in general, and so on and so forth. And it seems like that is now also continued on with other lenses, as like how geese, or how we perceive geese. They sort of swim around and sort of quack at each other. That is true. So, I think that's a good zinger, as it were, a good comedy beat to really lean on in a subtle way, kind of, almost. I almost didn't catch it. So, Ross, assuming that their mission is done, activates the transmitter. And so during their chat, the leader Goose talks about how the hearts of individuals can talk without necessarily saying the words, something to that effect. However, unfortunately, other bots have been indicated via that transmission where Ross is, and other bots are coming to collect. And the humans aren't so, well, they just see nature and they see this bot being, from their point of view, defective, and they're like, oh no, oh geez, get it back, or whatever. So then the bots proceed to attack. So, we have the geese during their migration in this sequence. BB was sort of like near the leader. Then BB is the one leading the geese, as he is now causing a distraction from the bots to escape this area that they have ended up in, where they are among other robots that aren't obviously Ross. They're also probably, still signaling their original protocol / sense danger, so they're attacking whatever. So we then see how Ross wakes up Fink, and they're still in the forest, obviously, those two. And I forget where it's mentioned in the movie, and I believe it was Fink who said it to Ross, saying how it's funny how life works. And this line is now reversed here, where now Ross says it back to Fink here. So Fink, the context of this line is that it is currently winter, which is why the birds are migrating in the first place, and some of the other animals are struggling. So Ross asks Fink for help, despite Fink seeing every other animal, because he's like the only fox there, as like a rival or not a friend at the very most. So, but then Ross is like, well, come on, help. So, so he does. And they proceed to grab all the animals and begin to move them all into one location, that being the hut that Ross has built. And obviously, initially, the animals don't take too long to kind of go wild in there. Kind of going pressure and being forced next to each other. And this is where Ross makes the statement, "Be more than your programming." aka be more than you are born to be more than just what you're told to be more than just some, well, almost a cog in the machine, almost ripping into the idea of AI too simultaneously. Obviously, be more than that, right? But it also kind of hits on humans as well. Again, especially if you're told to be something, you're destined to be X. Be a man. Even something along those lines, like you have to be a man, right? That's a very early trope and thing that was very common back in the day. Be this thing that is in this box. And don't be what you want to be, or don't be anything more than that. So that is sort of what that line is expressing beyond just programming, as it were. But we do get a cut of the end of winter ending, and the geese returning alongside BB, who's now being celebrated among the other geese for becoming essentially a leader for them in that moment. And BB also thinks their job is done. However, a new ship has arrived with a squid-like bot that is there to collect Ross, and even manages to trick them into getting into the ship. But Think gets there alongside BB at some other point. And the squid bot is trying to turn off and steal or take Ross's memories away to study it and learn how the heck this even happened in the first place. This is where the animals begin to fight back. And we begin to then see how BB makes his way into the ship. Yeah, I believe that happens a little later, sorry. But before Ross is turned off, Ross claims to be, well, the title of the movie, a wild robot, as it were. So the bots begin their attack on the animal kingdom, and Ross and the animals begin to try to fight back. They manage to get back out. However, the bots are sent to self-destruct via the squid bot's request and pressing these easy buttons to do so. But Ross is still recaptured at this point. So, BB, now getting there and seeing this, proceeds to fly them up. And as I said, now the squid bot is now fully taking the memories, but BB dives into the ship and proceeds to get to Ross. And this is where the first time in the movie where BB just outright says that he loves Ross, obviously in a maternal way, as in accepting the whole familial love, as it were. So, while that's going on, and outside, the attack has caused a forest fire, so the animals all proceed to go to the beaver, who has been cutting the tree all throughout the movie, this massive tree. And so they all persist in wanting to help him, but he wants to have Fink individually gloat how, because Fink earlier on throughout the movie, brazenly sort of mocked him really early on in the movie, in fact, when we first see them talking and around that section. So he does so, and then they all proceed to push the tree into the water, which allows the water to then catapult into the forest and clear the way. From there, they're in the air, currently, Ross and BB. So Ross takes out their core, or what was previously their core their new core, as it were, is something more, as Ross claims. So they don't need the old core anymore, as it were. So they store BB inside the chest area of Ross as they sort of fling downward. Though the animals, once Ross lands, want Ross to remain staying in the forest and protect them from any other further incoming attacks. However, Ross knows that they need to rejoin in order to have the forest animals be safe. And this is the second time in the movie where Fink almost breaks down, now feeling, again, this very familial way about Ross, clearly. And the other animals who are there, like this bear primarily, says that he'll be like this protector of Fink, and sort of perhaps in a more fatherly way, I don't know, but... And anyway, they begin to rebuild their forest, and that is when Ross leaves. Then we cut to Fink telling the rest of the animals the story of how Ross had entered their lives. And in our final shot, we then see BB fly all the way to where Ross is, which is back where the humans are, and sort of, again, playing along, as it were, to have a reunion of sorts, sort of like college is over and, it's back, it's time to reunite, sort of like that sequence of time, though significantly shorter, I suppose, in this regard. And that was The Wild Robot. And I must say, I was told how this is one of the better DreamWorks movies, and I will say, it's definitely up there. Yeah. I dig it. I dig the familial, sort of found family. This is right up the director's alley. This is the person who directed Lilo and Stitch, all about found family even back then. So this is definitely right up the director's alley. So I think that really shines here how that sort of plays into this movie in particular. How these, in particular, not just family, but a misfit family, being called, defective, as it were. Not a proper family, not the typical, dare I do the thing where I say conservative family, or the old school conservative family. I don't know, but it does seem like there are definitely a number of conservatives that still are on that vibe of, like, it has to be the mom, the father, and the son and the daughter. That's the typical family picture that you see. No other family allowed. That definitely seems to be a thing that still, in 2024, exists to this day in America. I know, it's crazy. But I have seen it, so... it is definitely refreshing to see this approach to found family, and approach to AI, and this sort of approach of saying, like, what really is the difference? And I know there have been discussions about how we incorporate AI currently, and there have been horror movies, and this is taking the approach of saying, well, AI is actually not that bad. I mean, obviously it does have its downsides. The antagonists outside of Ross are also robots. They are also AI. So it's not necessarily... I don't think the movie is necessarily being like, AI all the way. I think you have to read a little bit more carefully than that, rather than suggesting that that is what the writers were intending to put forth. But even just reading it on my own, the author applying, obviously, I would still take away that it's clearly trying to say that there are pluses and minuses to having AI, in this case, one that manages to break away from its programming is the one that is actually the most profound, perhaps. You know, what will that actually look like when AI in our world finally begins to gain its own level of sentience, its own will, its own path, as it were? Is that even, because I don't think that's happened yet, at least not to my knowledge. Though that there have been technological advancements that have been definitely on the higher end of things in terms of where I thought we would be quite a bit ago, if I'm being completely honest. Point being is that obviously that there's still quite a gap, and there are those who still think that AI is the death of us, aka Terminator, or, if AI can be more compatible via movies such as this that are suggesting that, like, well, if it can operate and program itself into believing and believing what is belief, right? That the very something that is very human in nature. At least we as humans like to think that belief is the thing that makes us, or among other things, a rather unique species in regards to other animals. So yeah, I definitely appreciated Fink's story. It's definitely a little bit of the Stitch vibe, right? He was the chaotic outsider, the destructor, but still wanting that place to belong. Fink was along the still sides of mischievous, but not I would not say quite at the level of Stitch. A little bit toned down, but still a little bit mischievous in the way that one would probably think of a fox. Again, sticking very tonally to animal, how we perceive animals anyway, in the way that they operate around us. The bear being a very aggressive animal, but then once, things are chillax, a bear is very chillax, very different temperaments for the bear, obviously, and different temperaments for other animals along that way. There are definitely some other animals that don't get that quite level of treatment. We do see deer throughout the movie. There are no speaking rules for the deer, so I'm not sure how they operate in terms of, like, though if I were to assume based on how they even move in the movie, well, like deer, they would even talk very majestically or speak more eloquently. And again, that's very much how we perceive deer in terms of nature, so even that could be guessed even without any lines being delivered by a deer. So that's what's really cool about it. Anyways, in terms of the score, I've gone on long enough. I think that this movie's fantastic. I would give it a 10 out of 10. Definitely highly recommend it. And that's my review of The Wild Robot, and if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. Want to head over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, so get to my PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly, and there to my Discord server. You can join, collab, chill, do all that cool stuff for free, and until next time, everyone, bye-bye.